welcome to our Culinary Passport class. I apologize we're getting started a few minutes late. I accidentally started our class on my personal page. Oops. But now we're all set and in the right place. So today we have a really fun menu. We're going to be making some recipes from different places in the world and taking a little culinary adventure. We're going to be going to France and making some croissants. And then we're going to travel back to South America and we're going to make some Brazilian salsa, which is very similar to probably salsa that you've already had. But if you've not had Brazilian salsa or been to Brazil, you've probably not had this exact taste because it's a little bit different than traditional salsa that we usually get here in the United States. So we're going to make it, and I encourage you to try it. We've made it at a lot of different camps, and it's usually really a favorite. People really like it, even though you're not 100% sure, because it seems different than traditional salsa. But I definitely encourage you to give it a try, or make it for somebody else that you know would love it too. We're kind of going to be jumping all over the place with our recipes today because we'll sort of make part of our croissants, and then we've got to put them in the fridge for a little bit, and then we'll work on our salsa, put that in the fridge for a little bit, finish up our croissants, and kind of wrap everything up together. These recipes work great together because you can kind of go back and forth between them, which is great when you're cooking. If you are cooking and you have some downtime, you can always leave the kitchen and do another thing and come back, as long as you set a timer if you have something in the oven. So we have on our page, you can find the recipe sheet that has the recipes for today, so you can follow along, whether you're doing the class live or you're doing it later. We're going to keep it up on our Facebook page so you can do it at a later date, whatever works conveniently for you. And then we also have a little printable activity sort of thing that we like to do when we do this theme, which is a little culinary passport. So you print it out, it's just one sheet, and you can print it out in color or you can print it out in black and white. Either way, it doesn't matter. And then you fold it this way, and then you fold it this way. So once you've folded it that way, you kind of have a front cover that says Culinary Passport, and you can color it in if you want. And in the back, there's a little thing you can color in as well. And then inside is the part that you really get to fill out and have fun with. It's got a little thing that says kind of about you, so you can tell some stuff about you, foods you like, a little place for your picture, which you could draw or cut out a photo if you have a photo, so it looks kind of like a real passport. Some of you probably have real passports. And then there's a little spot here where you can write, it says country and then foods I made. So I've already filled mine in for today. I wrote Brazil, salsa, and I wrote France, croissants, and then I just used a little stamp that my daughter lent me, a little butterfly, and stamped in the middle. You guys could stamp it, you could just sign it with a Sharpie, draw a picture, use a sticker, whatever you guys want to sort of create these. It's just a fun activity. I think for all ages. I like it too, just like, especially if it's like you're going to try to make some new food. So this could be like a good challenge for you in the next few weeks to try to look up and find some recipes from different places in the world and then give them a shot and then kind of fill out your culinary passport. So feel free to print that out. You can find it on our webpage in the event. And then after this class is finished and we post it to our page, we'll also put it in the comments there so it's easy to find. All right, so that's our passport all ready to go. Now, step one, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the oven for our croissants. So what I want to do is I want to turn them on to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So turn on the oven to 375 degrees. And again, the recipe sheet is posted this morning. You can find it on our Facebook page and in the Facebook event, so you can follow along. I'm going to go ahead, turn the oven on to 375. All right, oven is on to 375, so we are ready to get started on our croissants. We're going to sort of mix up our croissant dough. We're going to do a little thing that's called lamination. A lot of you, if you've watched baking challenge shows or cooking shows, you've seen that before. It's sort of a mini lamination. We're not going to do the 100 folds. We're just going to do a little bit so that we get those nice sort of flaky layers that you get in croissants. We're going to attempt to do that. Then we've got to put it in the fridge for a little bit. So the first thing you're going to need to get is one of your big bowls and a sifter, or I'm just using a sort of a mesh sieve today. If you don't have a sifter, that's fine. Just dump your stuff into your bowl and then whisk it up a little bit extra. I'm going to go ahead and sift my ingredients first, dry ingredients into my big bowl for my croissant. So the first thing we're going to put into our sifter is 3 cups of flour. I'm going to use some bread flour today. You guys can use whatever flour you have on hand. I've got this bread flour, thankfully, which works great for croissants. It really doesn't matter though. You can use any sort of all-purpose type flour. If you're using a gluten-free flour, I would suggest using like an all-purpose blend or a one-to-one type of blend, so you're getting something very similar to an all-purpose flour. So I'm going to go ahead and use 3 cups of the bread flour. I'm going to scoop it up and I'm going to level it off because I want to make sure I have exactly the right amount. When you're baking, especially something that might be a little on the finicky side or something you may have never tried making before, it's always a good idea to try to stick pretty close to the recipe. You know, when we're making our salsa, our amounts don't have to be 100% exact, but when we're making a baked recipe like croissants, we want to be pretty exact. So there's 2 cups and then 1 more. 3 total cups. And it's not visible, but I'm making a total mess here. I've got a ton of flour on the counter. That's okay. It's just going to keep getting messier here. So now I've got my flour in here. You could go ahead and start sifting that in if your sifter's full. I'm just going to kind of go part way. And then I'm going to add the next ingredient. The next ingredient is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So grab some baking powder. And again, I'm going to level it off. Baking powder containers tend to have a little leveler, so you can use the leveler or you can use your finger. So I want 2 teaspoons of that. Pretty exact. And I want a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. All right. And again, I'm going to level it off. 1/2 teaspoon baking soda. Next up is 2 teaspoons of sugar. And again, if you don't have any sugar on hand, you could omit that. You could leave it out. It's not critical. It just adds a very small hint of sweetness, which you'll notice even in like a buttery, not sweet croissant, you'll notice they're a little bit sweet. So I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. Probably should level it up, not over the bowl. All right, so I have exactly 1 teaspoon of salt. Yep, and I'm going to pop that in. Now, before I finish sifting and whisking up this stuff, I'm going to take care of my butter. So I've got some butter that was in the fridge. It's really cold, but I want to kind of cut it up to make it easier to get it mixed into our dough. So I'm going to take my cutting board here, and you can use, I'm going to move my flour out of the way. You can use a Kids Chef knife, a regular knife. We like to use these ones, our Kids Chef knives, plastic ones. They're available on our website. You can purchase them and they mail out in 1 to 2 days if you're interested in one of those. A lot of our chefs that cook with us have these already. And then we also have these that we use in a lot of our classes as well, our teen classes and our adult classes. If you're using a sharp knife, just make sure that you have supervision if you need it, if you're younger, or that a lot of kids say this when they come to our classes, they say, oh, I use a knife all the time at home. So a lot of you have a lot of experience and practice, so you're good. But I still like to review our knife skills, and we're going to be doing a lot of cutting for our salsa too. So you need 7 tablespoons of cold butter, just double checking, 7. So this is 8, so I really need almost all of this. And I'm using Earth Balance today, which is like a butter substitute, dairy-free, but you could use any butter you have on hand. But Earth Balance, if you need it to be dairy-free, you can use that. So I've got 7 tablespoons now here, and I just want to cut it into little sort of cubes so that it'll be easier to work into our dough. So when I cut, I'm keeping my left hand, because I'm right-handed, so I'm going to cut with my right hand. My finger's kind of tucked, because I don't want caught on my fingers. Butter can be a little tricky to cut, because it's kind of, well, I don't want to use the word greasy, but it sticks to the knife, so you got to be a little careful. So I'm just kind of cutting it in cubes. It doesn't have to be a perfect size, because we're going to mix it up into the dough and get it the size we want it. And then while we're finishing up our dry mixture, we're going to pop this into the freezer so we can be sure that it's really cold, because it gets a little warm in the whole cutting process. There we go. All right. Now that I've got the butter cut up, it's ready to go in the fridge. Oh, freezer, sorry. Well, you can put it in your fridge. I'm going to pop mine in the freezer because it's only going to be a couple minutes. It won't have time to freeze. It'll just help it get really cold. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to grab our flour mixture back, finish sifting the rest of our mixture into the bowl. Sometimes you get a little bit stuck in the bottom, especially that like organic sugar tends to be really grainy. Doesn't always go all the way through. Now take a whisk, so grab a whisk and sort of whisk your mixture up really nice gentle whisks, but really get it well combined. Don't want to whisk too fast. I'm sure most of you know if you whisk too fast, what's going to happen? Your stuff's going to fly out of your bowl everywhere. So keep your dry stuff in the bowl. You want to do just tight little circles. And we made this at a class not that long ago. I think it was in the fall. And I remember people saying, wow, I really thought that croissants would be, really, really hard, but I can't believe how easy this is. So, there's a lot of different recipes out there that are kind of complicated. This is kind of our easy version, and you still get a lot of that amazing croissantness going on when you're done. All right, we'll keep whisking a little more, maybe for just a bit more. I really want to make sure that I have it really well combined. Don't want to skimp on the whisking. Sometimes you have recipes that say don't overmix or overwhisk. This is not one of those when you're talking about the dry part. You can definitely give it a lot of whisks. All right. Well, now I have whisked it up really well. So your mixture should be evenly combined. And so in here we have our bread flour or whatever flour you have on hand, baking powder, baking soda, sugar, and salt. And that is all of our dry stuff. And now we're going to work in our butter. And then after that, we'll add our milk. And that's really all the ingredients. And we'll get our dough together. And then I'll show you guys kind of how we get it rolled out in a special way that can turn it into croissants. So I'm going to grab our butter that I popped in the freezer like a minute ago. It should be really cold. And we're going to work that into the flour. All right, I've got our butter. Feels really nice and cold. I'm just going to dump it right into the flour. So just dump your butter cubes right in the flour, and then we're going to use our hands to work it into the dough. So make sure you have nice, clean hands. It's always a good idea to wash your hands before you start cooking, but if you notice that maybe you were touching your face or touching other things during the beginning, might be a good idea to wash your hands again. We like to wash our hands a lot when we're cooking because we get pretty messy. And if you have a pastry cutter, you can use that too. I like to use my hands. So what I'm doing is just kind of squishing the butter till it's about the size of peas. And this whole process of what we're doing is pretty similar to a lot of different recipes. So it might not just be croissants. Maybe you're making, we do this when we make biscuits. And a lot of the recipes that we've already done in some of our live classes, you might notice we already kind of did this. You don't want any butter pieces that are bigger than about the size of a green pea. Most of you know what the size of a green pea looks like. Sort of like a little frozen pea that you might have at dinner or in some rice or in a recipe. That's about the size you want. So we're just going to kind of squish in, mash that butter into the flour to really get it mixed in. And a lot of times when we do this recipe or similar recipes at classes, we don't all get a turn to do this because it takes kind of a while. So it's really actually fun that we're getting to do it in an online class where everybody gets a chance, because this is really fun. It's actually really relaxing and therapeutic, so don't fall asleep here, guys, but it's actually really a very relaxing thing to just kind of sit. It's kind of like those little sand Zen gardens that people have sometimes, where you kind of like usually use a little rake to sift through it, but it's very relaxing, and the flour is very soft. Now, the one thing you don't want to do is overdo it. So we won't want to sit here for a half hour doing this, or our butter will get too mixed in. And I'm kind of looking at mine, it's looking really good. I don't see, I'm going to kind of use my hands to kind of flip through it. I don't see any pieces that are really larger than a green pea, or feel any pieces, so I think it's just about right. And then I'm going to go ahead and dust off my hands, and we're going to get our hands messy again, but I'm going to go ahead and rinse them off just to make it a little easier to finish up our dough. Alrighty. So now that we've done this, we're going to finish up our dough with some milk, and you need 1 cup of milk. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our milk from the fridge. I was keeping it cold in there. And we're going to add in 1 cup, get our dough together. Sometimes I feel like getting things out of my fridge is like playing Tetris. It's like, oh, how do you get this and that without knocking over that? So I'm just using 2% milk. You can use whatever milk you have on hand. And oh, that's our oven telling us it's up to temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a cup of milk. And again, I'm going to make sure I'm pretty close to exactly a cup. So I'm following the recipe pretty tightly. There we go. And then you need a large spoon or spatula that you can use to stir your dough together. And just kind of gently fold, mix your dough together. It's going to come together pretty quickly. Then we're going to be using our hands to knead it up and do that whole lamination thing we talked about. Okay, that's looking great. As you kind of stir and mash it with the spoon, you'll notice the dough kind of coming together. Still, it's going to look very crumbly to you. That's totally normal because once we start the whole lamination and kneading process with our hands, it's going to really turn into a really beautiful dough. All right, I'm going to pop the milk back in the fridge, and then we're going to get this rolled out. All right, so you're going to want to grab something for your counter. I just like to use parchment. It just makes it easier to roll it out. Makes cleanup a little bit easier, still a little messy, but I like to have like a piece of parchment to roll it out, and it makes it a little easier. So I'm going to just kind of scoop my dough kind of right onto my parchment, and kind of got a nice big batch of dough here because everybody loves croissants. You want to make sure you have enough. Now, if your dough's a little crumbly, it comes together once we start kneading it. You could always add a little more milk if you feel like your dough is way too dry. Mine seems just about right once we start rolling it out. And you'll see there's going to be a little bit of flour dust in the bottom of the bowl and stuff, and that's totally fine. So sometimes I like to take a little extra flour if I notice it's sticking to my rolling pin, and just kind of dust the rolling pin a little bit, so you can do that. And then you're just going to want to sort of first, before you start rolling it out, knead it a little bit with your hands. Kind of squish it together so you kind of have a nice giant ball of dough. And when you're kneading, you can use a couple of different tricks. You can just use the plain squish method where you squish it, or you can do punch, punch, fold, where you use the heel of your palm to punch, punch, and then fold the dough over, punch, punch, fold the dough over, and just kind of keep doing that just for a couple of minutes. We don't need to knead this dough for too long for this particular recipe, just enough that it kind of comes together in sort of a nice ball of dough. So let me kind of show you guys. Got a nice ball of dough there, squishing pretty well. Now I'm going to take my rolling pin and I'm going to roll it out into a rectangle. It doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle, just a rectangular shape. And then a little bit of my dough is sticking here. So I'm just going to grab a little extra flour, dust over my rolling pin, make it a little easier. Roll it out to a nice big rectangle. Brilliant. Now I'm going to fold it over just like that. So I have a smaller rectangle but thicker. I'm going to kind of turn mine and I'm going to roll it out again. Sometimes when you watch like those baking championships or like the Great British Bake Off, I think that one's what it's called. I love to watch cooking shows, and so do my daughters, so we have a lot of fun watching them. You'll see they will laminate things, which is this process of rolling and folding. Like sometimes a recipe might say like 20 times or something, and that's a lot. That takes a lot of work. Luckily for us, we don't need to do 20 times. We're just going to do a few times. So I rolled out the rectangle again, and I'm folding it over again. I think I'm going to try to do 4 times, because that'll give us some pretty nice croissants. All right, so I'm rolling it out. This is my 3rd time. I'm rolling it out into another rectangle. There we go. It's like the more I roll, the harder it gets. But this is a really good upper body workout. Get a nice little arm workout here. Also, I'm kind of using a small rolling pin. These are what we use in a lot of our classes. If you have a bigger rolling pin, it will definitely work even better. Now that I've done the 3rd time, I've got my beautiful rectangle here again. This time I'm gonna fold it over, and then I'm gonna fold it over one more time. And so then you should kind of have something that looks like, a towel that you folded, sort of, in a little rectangle like this. And this is what we're gonna kind of squish up together, and we're gonna put it in the fridge. And we're going to put it in the fridge while we work on our salsa. So I'm going to go ahead, just put it in a bowl. You guys could wrap it up in your parchment or some plastic. I'm just going to go ahead and put it just like this right in the fridge. All right, it was difficult, but I found space for it. So now I'm going to clean the counter just a little bit. We're still going to roll out again, but just a little bit so we have some space to work on our salsa. Again, like I said, this is sort of a jumping around recipe. We're sort of hopping over to France and then back to Brazil and then back to France. It's definitely an adventure, a nice travel. And if you can't really go to any of those places right now, sort of the next best thing is getting to make and eat food from there. So, all right, so I'm going to clean my hands just a little bit. I'm guessing your hands are as messy as mine. We'll work on our salsa for a little bit, then we'll finish up our croissants. All right, clean hands. So you're going to want to grab another big bowl here, just like you had before. So grab another bowl, a clean one here, and we're going to use this bowl for our salsa. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sort of mix up the sauce, for lack of a better word, the sauce and the seasoning, and then we're going to dice up our veggies and get them in the bowl. So a lot of times when you make traditional salsa, you add in lime juice. For this recipe, this is a Brazilian salsa recipe. It doesn't take lime juice, it takes vinegar. So usually you have an acid, and like citric fruits like lemon and lime are very acidic, and so is vinegar. So that has a very similar feel in the recipe, and that's how you kind of get a very similar taste. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put into the bottom of the bowl 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 3 tablespoons of vinegar. Now you can use any vinegar that you have on hand. Just white vinegar will work. Balsamic vinegar even will work. Really any vinegar, rice vinegar even. I'm going to use some apple cider vinegar because I have it on hand. So I'm putting in, let me make sure I say this right, 3 tablespoons of vinegar and 2 of the olive oil. So 3 tablespoons of vinegar, get that in your bowl. 2 tablespoons of your olive oil. It's not going to seem like a lot, but you get a lot of juice from your veggies, so it'll definitely be the right amount. And then the recipe just says salt and pepper to taste. So I'm just going to start with just a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. And then like when I taste the salsa at the end, if it doesn't feel like it has enough salt, I'll add a little more. So you guys can do it that way. You can just go ahead, add a little extra salt at the end. I'm just going to put in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to start. And then that way I won't over salt it and I can add a little more later. And for black pepper, again, I'm just going to add in like a pinch. So a pinch is whatever can fit between your thumb and your pointer finger. That's a pinch. If you're following a recipe and you're a kid and you have small hands, you might want to do a couple of pinches. So I'll do 2 pinches of pepper. And then I'm going to whisk it up. So I'm going to grab a clean whisk, and you just want to do a little thing called emulsifying. Emulsifying is like when you take a dressing bottle out of the fridge and you shake it up, a salad dressing bottle. You're getting that acid and that fat, so the vinegar and the oil, to combine and make a smooth mixture. And so one way that you can emulsify is just to whisk. And this time you're going to want to do really fast whisks. So it's kind of nice to have a deep bowl and really get that mixture creamy. It's going to kind of get like a almost yellowy cream color. Kind of show you guys what it looks like. Just like that, and sort of mix it up. And then I'm just going to leave my whisk in the bowl because chances are by the time I'm done cutting my vegetables, I might need to give it another quick whisk or so before we put them in. So now that we've mixed up our vinegar and our olive oil and salt and pepper, we're going to get all of our veggies ready. So I'm going to grab a cutting board and a knife, and we're going to get cutting. I'm going to use our Kids Chef knife. Alrighty, got our stuff here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to use is, it says a small onion on the recipe. I'm going to go ahead and use some shallot, which is a type of onion. It's sort of a mild onion and sort of a little bit of a lavenderish color to it. And yeah, I'm going to just peel off the peeling so you guys can kind of see what it looks like. There you go. And if you have a yellow onion, that's delicious in this salsa. Whatever onion you have will totally work. We just already had this on hand. I think for the onion, I am going to use the sharper knife, but the rest of the veggies, I'm going to use the Kids Chef knife. So whenever you're cutting, you want to hold whatever the grippy part on the knife is with your dominant hand. Your other hand should be in what we call the claw, or it looks like a letter C. It also looks like a Lego hand. Somebody pointed that out to me at our Lego class. And it's just a great way to keep your fingers tucked so you don't accidentally cut on them. This is the way I cut. This is the way lots of adults and professional chefs cut. They may not call it the claw, although they should, but they keep those fingers tucked so they're not cutting on their fingers. So I'm going to use the sharper knife. And if you want a grown-up to help you cut the onion, that's totally fine. Sometimes cutting onions can make you cry or make your eyes water. It's not really making you cry. Unless you're sad about something, then you might just be crying, which is totally okay. But it has a gas that it emits into the air, which can make your eyes water. So one thing that helps is I wear glasses. So a lot of the time I wear my glasses, and that kind of prevents it, and so my eyes don't water too much. Another trick is you can have a grown-up light a candle nearby, and that will burn off some of the gas. So they don't make your eyes water. I find that the shallots, the purple onion, well, this sort of lavender colored onion, not a red onion, but the shallot, they don't really make your eyes water, and neither do green onions, but I do find that yellow onions and red onions tend to do it. They're a little stronger in flavor, and they just tend to make your eyes water more often. So those are a couple of tricks that I have found work. I've tried a lot of the different myths out there, and a lot of them really are myths that don't work. But also just having a grown-up help you out. A lot of times at our cooking classes, the kids will be really excited to try cutting the onions, but then sometimes they'll want to have a little help, which is totally fine. All right, that's looking good. I wanted to use the sharp knife for the shallots because I really didn't want them too big. I don't like giant pieces of onion, even in like salsa where you're scooping it up with a chip. Well, not a big fan of that. I like the onion part to be pretty small. And whenever you're making something like a salsa or a dip and you're cutting up things to go in it, you kind of want the pieces to be small because you want it to be able to be bite-sized. So think about what's going to taste good in your mouth, what's going to be pleasant. A giant chunk of something that didn't get sort of cut properly isn't going to taste very good. You're going to be like, whoa, what's that? So now I'm going to go ahead and scrape our shallot into the bowl that we had our sauce mixture in for the salsa. And next I'm going to switch over to my other knife, my Kid Chef knife, and we're going to move on to our tomatoes. So 4 tomatoes, relatively small. I'm going to use these plum tomatoes. They work really great, and we're just going to dice them up. And this is one of those ones where you guys can be in charge of how you want to cut them. So if you want really big pieces, you can make them really big. But again, like remember, you're going to be scooping it up on a chip because it's salsa. Although this salsa tastes great on top of fish, you can put it on meat, you can put it on sandwiches. But you just want to kind of keep them bite-sized. You don't want them to be too big. I always find that people who come to our classes, especially kids and teens, are so good at cutting things small. They've got the patience to just kind of take their time and keep cutting. And again, this can be very therapeutic too, the cutting, just because you can just kind of take your time and cut them nice and small. So I'm keeping my fingers tucked and dicing up these tomatoes. So I'm going to get the tomatoes into the bowl when I'm done cutting them up. And then we'll move on to the next thing. There we go. All right. So this part takes a little bit of time, but trust me when I tell you it's worth it because I love salsa, and I love salsa that comes in a jar. It's delicious, but there's something so amazing about fresh salsa. There's just nothing like it. The taste of that salsa right after you've made it and it's had a little bit of time to sort of marinate its flavors. Oh, so good. I'm very excited for you to try it. All right, so there's 1 tomato. Let's put that in the bowl. I'm going to cut another one. Probably what we're going to do is we're going to take a little break in our salsa recipe, fly back to France real quick, and finish up our croissants. Got it. Okay. And you'll notice when you're cutting tomatoes that they leak a lot of juice. And I like that juice, so I try to kind of scoop it into the bowl after when I'm scraping the stuff. But it's okay if you don't get it all. That's totally normal. Tomatoes usually are very juicy, and there's no way to keep it all. But I like that tomato juice, so I try to scrape it into the bowl if I can. All right, that's looking great. Well, I'm going to scrape in what we have so far, and then we're going to switch over to our croissants so we can pop them in the oven, because I really want to be able to show what they look like before we're done. And so I want to make sure we have time to get them in the oven. And that'll give us something to do while they're cooking too. We'll be able to finish up our salsa. So I'm going to just move my cutting board out of the way so I have some space to roll out my croissants. This is really, I don't want to say it's the fun part because it's all fun, but this is really fun. I really love shaping the croissants and turning them into a croissant. It's really fun. So I'm just moving my salsa over for now, taking a little break. Salsa is one of those great recipes that does not have to be made in a certain time. You could take a break, let it sit a little bit, and come back to it. It'll be totally fine. I'm going to grab my dough out of the fridge. I need another piece of parchment because we're going to roll it out and shape them into croissants. And I also need a pan, so make sure you have a pan. I put a little piece of parchment down. You're going to want to put a piece of parchment down. If you don't have parchment, grease your pan a little bit so your croissants won't stick to it. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to put just a little bit of flour on it, just to sort of dust it a little bit, and get my rolling pin back again. All right, awesome. So now I'm going to roll this out. So this is kind of a little tricky. It's a nice sort of thick, heavy dough feeling. And I might switch over to my other rolling pin too, if I'm struggling a little, which is a little heavier. I think we'll use our bigger rolling pin. So if you have a larger rolling pin, switch to that. And you just want to roll it into a large rectangle. We don't have to do any more folding or rolling. It's just a matter of getting it to a fairly thin sort of thickness so that we can turn it into croissants. And that takes a little bit of elbow grease. So you might need a grown-up to help you with this part if you're rolling it out and it's a little bit tricky. Especially because we put all those layers in it, but it's going to be worth it when we're done. It's going to taste really good. There we go. I would say you want it to be about, I'm going to go ahead and say maybe a 1/4 inch thickness, maybe a little less than that even. You don't want it too thick because we're going to be rolling it up. And it's going to puff up. So, everybody loves giant croissants, so it's okay if it puffs up for sure. But I like to kind of get it a little bit thin first. And also that maximizes how many croissants I can make out of this dough too. That's looking pretty good. I want to get it a little bit bigger. Almost there. Now, if you have a pizza cutter, that will work great for cutting this. Otherwise, you can just use a knife. That'll work fine. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do it with a pizza cutter, but a knife will work as well. We're almost there. I'm going to really give it a good rolling and finish it up. Just want to stretch it just a little more. There we go. All right, I'm feeling good. Got my rectangle. Well, that's kind of a square. And I'm going to cut it into triangles. So, got my pizza cutter here. And I'm just going to basically start at one edge and sort of make a long triangle like this. Does not have to be perfect at all. But I just kind of like to make long, skinny triangles. There we go. So long, skinny triangles, just like that. And we're going to turn these into croissants. Now, before I roll these up, I'm going to get just a little bit of butter. So that tablespoon that I didn't use from making the dough, I'm going to melt. So I'm just going to put it in a glass measuring cup and pop it in the microwave for a little bit. You can also melt it on the stove. We just need a little bit. And if you have a little brush for brushing it on the top of croissants, you can. Otherwise, a spoon or a little spatula works great for that too. You don't have to have one of these silicone brushes. Get a little more. So to roll up your croissant, you're going to start at the pointy end. I'm sorry. Let me say that the other way. You're going to start at the flat end, not the pointy end. The pointy end should be the last part. So you start at the sort of short side. So don't roll up from a long side. Make sure you roll up from the short, flat side, and then slowly pull it this way as you're rolling, and kind of curve it a little bit, just like that, and get your point kind of on the top, and then you kind of have your croissant shape just like that. I'm going to put it right on my pan here. Now, I'm definitely thinking I could have rolled mine a little bit thinner, but I really wanted to make them nice and big. Also, I was getting very tired rolling my dough out. So, once you have them rolled out, you can brush them with the butter and sprinkle them with everything seasoning if you have them. I like this recipe because it's kind of a cross between croissants and like an everything bagel. If you don't have everything seasoning, you could just put a little salt on or sprinkle a little sugar, really whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and use some of this everything seasoning, which is basically poppy seeds, sesame seeds, onion flakes. Let's see what else. Salt and garlic. Yeah, so just like that sort of traditional mix that you would get when you get an everything bagel. And I'm just going to sprinkle it right on top of the croissant. Now, you could also make your own if you just have some sesame seeds or the poppy seeds. You could mix it all together. So start with your short side, roll it up, pulling it out as you go, kind of. You keep your little point sort of on the top. And if it seems kind of round, this one's kind of round, I usually just use my hands and sort of stretch it, twist it to the side, kind of pop it down a little. Some of these will be less pretty than others, like the rough-edged one will definitely not be quite as beautiful looking. You could also use the the pizza cutter to cut off a little of that uneven edge. You don't have to keep it. So again, starting with the short side, rolling it up, stretching it as I roll and twisting it into that croissant shape, and kind of getting that point right at the top, sort of squishing the corners like this, setting it down, just like that, yeah. Same thing here. There we go. And you can see, I don't know if you guys will be able to see on here, but if you look here at this dough, you can see all those layers there. That was what happened when we laminated it, when we folded it, rolled it, folded it, rolled it. That's how when you have a croissant that's baked, you'll notice there's those, sort of pull it apart and there's those flaky layers of your sort of bread. And that is what's going to happen with this dough. All right, I've got 2 left, and then we're popping them in the oven, and we're going to go ahead and finish up our salsa while they cook. And I'm guessing that my assistants are going to come down soon because they're going to start smelling the croissants, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, food's ready. All right, this one is a little funny looking, but I kind of like it. And one of the things I love about making homemade food, but especially homemade croissants, is that everything kind of looks a little different. It doesn't look like it came out of a machine or a factory, which there's nothing wrong with that, but there's just something really awesome about having sort of this organic, natural looking, everyone looks a little bit different, a little bit homemade, like an art project. And well, I love art and I love cooking, so it just goes so perfectly well together. So I'm brushing all of the croissants with butter, the melted butter, and I'm going to sprinkle on the everything seasoning. Now, you might want to just do some of them with the everything seasoning. Maybe you want to make some with a little sugar so they're a little sweeter, or a little cinnamon. You guys could do it however you like. Oh, awesome. That's going to be so good. All right, let me sort of show you guys. So here we have our croissants. We have them buttered, seasoned. They're ready to go in the oven. Best part is they don't take that long. This was what took the longest part, making the dough, rolling it out, shaping it. Now they only take about 10 to 20 minutes. That's what the recipe says. I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes and check on them. They might need more time, but I don't want to let them burn on the bottom or anything, so I want to make sure I'm keeping a good eye. Mine are really big and fat, so I'm guessing they're going to take a little longer than 10 minutes, but you never know. It's always a good idea to check your recipes a little bit before you think they might be done, because it's better to have them not quite done yet than to be like, whoops, too late, burn. All right, set the timer. Croissants are in the oven. We're going to finish up this salsa so that we can try it. I'm excited about the salsa. All right, so I've got our bowl back here, and I've got our cutting board back here. I'm going to just kind of wipe our counter a little bit, which is covered in flour and delicious croissant dough. So I'm just going to rinse my hands real quick, and then we're going to finish up this salsa. All right, awesome. So back to our salsa. So if you left off where I left off, then you're probably somewhere in the tomatoes. I'm not sure. That's where I left off. I was cutting the tomatoes. So remember, I'm keeping my left hand tucked, my fingers tucked, and I'm cutting with my right hand because I'm right-handed. If that's opposite for you, you can do it the opposite way. And I'm just dicing these tomatoes up. I don't want them to be too big. I want them to be kind of small. All right, that looks good, nice and juicy. And again, I'm going to scrape that juice right into the bowl. And there's no perfect way to dice the tomato, but I find that cutting it into slices and then taking those slices and cutting them into small little bits works the best. All right, there we go. All sliced up. Now I can dice it up. And then once I have it all cut into small little pieces, we're going to move on and we're going to cut some green pepper. And a lot of times that's not a very traditional ingredient in the salsa that you might find in the jar or that you might have at a restaurant around here. But it tastes really delicious in this recipe. It's really good. And if you don't have a bell pepper, you could use a sweet pepper. You could even use jalapeno if you like it really spicy. This one's going to be a very mild version. We're not going to make ours too spicy. There we go. And this recipe is something that will keep in the fridge for, a few days, up to a week. If it makes it that long, usually we eat it up before then. And it's great with chips. It's good to put on fish if you're grilling fish or grilling chicken or really any recipe that would benefit from a sauce or a salsa. This is great on. Ooh. All right, we're almost done. Okay, scraping the tomato, done with the tomato. So the next ingredients that we have are our last two ingredients. We have some parsley and I'm using a green bell pepper, but you could use any color, it doesn't matter. Our parsley is curly parsley, which is a little bit trickier. So if you have flat leaf parsley, that works pretty well. But this was all I could find at the store this week. So sometimes, especially right now, you might not be able to find all the perfect ingredients. So whatever you have on hand, you can use. So for the green pepper, I'm going to do the same thing by keeping my fingers tucked. I'm going to dice it kind of into sections and then into strips. And then I'm going to take those strips and cut them into little tiny, sort of a dice, just like we did with the tomatoes. So kind of cut it into sections, and I'm going to cut those sections into strips, just like this. And I usually pull out if you've got that white part in the middle or seeds. I usually like to kind of pull that part out. It won't hurt it if any seeds get in your salsa. That's totally fine. Especially on a bell pepper, they're not spicy at all. On a jalapeno, the seeds tend to be kind of spicy. But I usually like try to get them out. All right, so we're gonna get this cut in strips. I can see one of my assistants coming to check on things. How you doing?
Good.
Good? How's school going?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Yeah, and are you wondering what we're making?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are making Brazilian salsa. We're taking a little trip to Brazil, and we're making some everything croissants. We're taking a little trip to France. Do you want to peek in the oven? Tell me how they look. Can you smell them?
Yeah.
They smell good? You check. Oh, you got the light on. Ooh.
Look good.
They look good. Are they getting puffy? Oh, they are starting to get really puffy. Awesome. They're going to be really good. Okay, would you like to help me cut these?
Sure.
All right. Well, why don't you wash your hands? I've cut them into strips, and now we just need to dice them kind of into a fine little dice. So into like little tiny cubes, just like that. We're going to toss them in our bowl when we're done. And then the last thing we'll do is cut up our parsley a little bit, mix it all together, and we can taste test it. We've got some tips we can use. Today we're going to use some plantain chips that we have, which is something, plantains is something that you might get in South America a lot and in Brazil. We don't have time to make plantain chips, so we're going to use some we already have, but you could also eat it with corn chips. It tastes delicious with corn chips too, or whatever chips you kind of have on hand. All right, go ahead. You want to start? I've cut them into strips. Yeah, we're just going to dice them into a little dice, and then once they're all kind of diced up, we'll dump them in the bowl. I'll grab another cutting board so we can both cut. That'll speed up our cutting process a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. This is kind of the part that takes the longest, but I like to show it when we're able to show it. So it's really nice for everybody to kind of be able to do this part. It's a great sort of, I was saying it was relaxing. Do you think cutting is relaxing?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Unless it's like loud.
Well, maybe if you're doing like some crazy, but I find that like just cutting tomatoes or peppers can be kind of relaxing. But you do have to pay attention to what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So like how you're keeping your fingers tucked. All right. And I was also saying that it doesn't taste very good in the salsa if you leave any of the pieces like too big, right?
Yeah.
So we're cutting them pretty small, not, microscopic, but just on the small side so that we can have a nice salsa. We're making good progress. Teamwork works really well. So if you're working with another person, you're probably going to be going really fast.
If you want to do it quick, you can do 2 at a time.
2 at a time? Wow, we got a pro here, you guys. Just cutting 2 at a time. I'm going to try it. They're pretty thin, so I think it works. Nice job. All right. All right, Isla, that looks really good. What do you think? Do you think we have enough peppers?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Then let's switch up and finish up cutting the celery. Celery would be good in this, but no, this is parsley. So we're going to use a lot of parsley in this recipe. You actually need about a 1/3 cup or so. It doesn't have to be exact.
How do you
So this is what we're going to do. We're going to pull it off the stem first. So first, kind of, because we've got curly parsley, which is a little trickier. If you have flat leaf parsley, same thing. You'll just pull it off the stems, kind of discard the stems. A little bit of the stem is fine. And flat leaf is a little bit easier, but we have curly today. We're going to get it pulled off. Oh, yeah, that looks good. And then after we've sort of pulled it off the stems, we're just going to give it a rough little dice. It doesn't take long at all. Just kind of take your knife and sort of chop or kind of dice it just a little bit back and forth to make the pieces just a little smaller.
That was this one.
Yep, that knife works great too. You just kind of, yeah, just like that. Keeping this hand tucked still, but just kind of breaking the leaves up a little bit so they're a little smaller. Another trick is you could use your hand and just rip it apart. We're basically kind of making green confetti. That's what we're trying to do. Oh, I like your confetti. It looks good. I'm guessing we're going to be able to check on our croissants soon too. All right, so I'm going to scrape my peppers and parsley, and then you can scrape yours in, okay? That fresh parsley smells so good, doesn't it? Ooh, that's our timer. I'm going to check on them, see if they're ready or if they need more time.
I hope they are ready.
We hope they are ready. Yeah, but we have to let them cool a little. Oh, they're starting to look really good. But you know what? I think they do need a little more time. I'm going to pull them out so we can get a better look. No, hold on. All right. And when I kind of look on the bottom, oh yeah, the bottom's starting to get a little brown, but they're not quite done yet. They need a little longer. But I want to sort of show a little bit how they look. So they're almost done. They're getting close. We'll put a picture of what they look like when they're totally done in the comments as well later, so you guys will be able to see it. You'll kind of notice they've got like a nice little brown starting to happen on the bottom. They're getting a little bit of a crust. They've got all these beautiful layers. But I think they're not quite done. These ones need just a little bit more because they're nice and fat. Also, you'll notice a few of them started to try to unroll a little bit. That's totally normal. You can try to squish it back together a little bit.
They'll still be tasty.
Oh, they'll be so tasty. And beautiful. I think they're beautiful. So I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes this time. I did 10 before. To give them another 5 minutes, and I think they'll be done then because they're getting pretty close. But I don't want them to be raw in the middle. I want to make sure they're cooked all the way through. All right, let's mix up our salsa, taste test it before we say goodbye. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right, so give you a spoon. And she's just going to fold this mixture together and get our salsa all combined.
Looks yummy.
Looks good. I'm going to grab our chips. Alrighty, we got some plantain chips here. You could also have it with corn chips. That would be really good.
And chips. What can I say? What flavor? Cheese chips.
Cheese chips might be good, but it might be a little different here. All right. Oh, that's looking good. Folding it up nice. It's kind of gotta get. I know that purple onion mixed with all the red and the green. It's really beautiful. This salsa. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. The combination of the parsley and the vinegar, and the tomato, it's really like. You smell that? It smells really good. It's hard to believe that salsa without lime juice could smell so good because I really love lime juice, but this recipe doesn't call for it. You think it's still going to be good?
Yeah, if only they can make a device that could
show you what it looks like.
Through.
All right, a smell-a-scope?
Yeah.
I know, I wish we had a device that we could say smell. But if people are making this at home, then they're going to be smelling the same delicious things. All right, should we taste test it before we say goodbye?
Yeah.
I'm going to grab us a bowl. Now, if you make our recipes, whether you're making them live or you make them later on, we would love to see pictures. You can post them in the comments. You can private messages to us, email them to us at hello@yummysprout.com. We've been getting a lot of private messages, and we just love to see pictures of people cooking and making our recipes. It makes us so happy. It makes it all worth it to be able to do this. So I'm going to put some salsa in here. Oh, you're just trying right out of the bowl. I love that. I love that. All right. We're going to move our bowl here. So good. Show what it looks like. Let's try it. I'm going to try it. You tried it already. Is it good?
So good.
So good. I'm going to scoop up a really big one.
What? It's so good, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I shouldn't talk with my mouth though, huh? That is delicious. And I was telling them at the beginning that we could add more salt because I only added a 1/4 teaspoon. What do you think? Does it need more salt?
I think it's good.
I think it's good because our chips are a little bit salty. If your chips are kind of salty, it's kind of good to have a salsa that's not too salty. But if you taste your mixture and it needs a little salt, go ahead and add it. Well, I think we're going to say goodbye now. And thank you so much, everybody, for cooking with us. It brings us so much joy to be able to share recipes with people. And even though we can't be in person and have in-person classes right now, we're able to connect with people. So please drop us a message, leave us a comment. We would love to see pictures. Let us know suggestions for classes or recipes you'd like to make. We'd love to hear
Maybe
that
like
too.
themes, too.
Themes, yeah, anything. We would love to hear that. But so what was it, Isla, that you like to say before we go? I forgot.
Yummy sprout out.
I don't know why I keep forgetting. Yummy sprout out. So thank you so much for cooking with us. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we'd love to hear how you like the recipes. So ready?
Yummy
Yummy sprout out.